The camera opens on a roaring military base under the golden heat of the afternoon sun. Mechanics are shouting, wrenches clanging, engines sputtering, but one sound dominates all: the deep, choking cough of a machine refusing to start. In the middle of the chaos stands a powerful figure, a decorated general with decades of command behind his shoulders, his patience running thin. He smirks and says loudly, half in frustration and half in jest, "If anyone can fix this damn engine, I'll marry them myself." The men around him burst into laughter. What he doesn't know is that his words are about to be tested by the last person anyone expects. A quiet, overlooked black recruit who refuses to be underestimated. Welcome to Swift Tale, where every story burns with grit, emotion, and unexpected triumphs. If you're visiting for the first time, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because here, every tale reminds you that greatness often comes from the most unlikely places. Today's story isn't just about a broken engine or a bold challenge. It's about how one man's confidence and quiet brilliance silenced a room full of laughter. It's about how prejudice can blind even the wisest leader, and how one act of courage can change an entire legacy. In a world where people are often judged by their appearance before their abilities, this story asks a question. What happens when the person you doubt most is the one who saves you? This isn't just a story of metal and machinery, it's a story of redemption, respect, and resilience. So stay with me until the end, because by the time this engine roars to life, you'll see that sometimes a single moment of faith in yourself can make the whole world stop laughing. The story begins in the heart of a sprawling military base. Rows of armored vehicles lined up under the blinding sun, soldiers moving in rhythm, the air thick with fuel and frustration. At the far end of the yard, a massive experimental engine sits open, surrounded by top engineers and mechanics. It was supposed to be the pride of the army, a next-generation combat engine worth millions, built to power the future of military transport. But for weeks, no one has been able to make it run. Every expert who touches it walks away defeated. The hum of failure hangs heavy in the air. General Armstrong, a man known for his iron discipline and sharper tongue, watches with growing irritation. His boots crunch over the gravel as he surveys the broken engine, arms crossed, eyes narrowing. 3 weeks, he growls. 3 weeks and not one of you geniuses can make this thing start. His words slice through the silence. The men shuffle uncomfortably, heads down, wiping grease from their hands. They've replaced parts, rewired circuits, even flown in specialists, yet the machine remains stubbornly lifeless. Finally, in a moment of frustration, the general smirks and says, half joking but loud enough for everyone to hear, "You know what? Whoever can fix this thing, I'll marry them myself." Laughter erupts around him, the kind that masks embarrassment. The mechanics chuckle nervously, soldiers grin, and even the officers exchange awkward smiles. To them, it's an impossible task. The engine is too advanced, too damaged, too unpredictable. The general's words are nothing more than sarcasm to lighten the tension. But standing a few steps behind the group, sweeping dust near the hangar's edge, is a young recruit named Malik Johnson. He looks up briefly, eyes narrowing with quiet curiosity. While everyone else laughs, he listens not to the general's words but to the faint clicking sound coming from the engine's housing. It's a sound only a mechanic's ear would recognize, a sign that the problem isn't as complicated as everyone thinks. Still, he stays silent, watching as others continue to fail. The general, shaking his head, turns away. "I've had enough for today, pack it up," he barks, walking toward his jeep. The soldiers begin cleaning up, their faces defeated. The broken engine sits under the harsh sun, glinting like a metal beast, mocking everyone who tried to tame it. No one notices Malik's gaze linger a little longer. For him, it's not just a broken machine, it's a challenge. A test of skill, pride, and the quiet fire that no one has ever taken seriously. Little does anyone know, the real story is about to begin, not with a commanding officer, not with a veteran engineer, but with the young man holding a rag and a wrench, ready to prove that genius can wear any uniform. His name was Private Malik Johnson, a 22-year-old recruit whose journey to this base was anything but ordinary. Born and raised in the rough side of Detroit, Malik grew up in a neighborhood where broken engines were easier to find than working ones. His mother worked double shifts at a diner, his father was gone before he turned 10, and the garage down the street became his second home. While other kids played basketball or hung out on corners, Malik spent his afternoons covered in grease, tinkering with whatever old car someone abandoned in the alley. He didn't have textbooks on engineering, just his instincts, his hands, and an unshakable curiosity about how things worked. By the time he was 16, he could rebuild an engine from scratch using spare parts no one else thought were useful. He was called the machine whisperer by locals, the boy who could bring metal back to life. But no matter how good he was, opportunity never came easy. Mechanics dismissed him because of his age, and recruiters overlooked him because of where he came from. So when the military offered him a chance to escape the cycle and work with real machines, he took it without hesitation. He thought it was his way up, a place where skill would finally matter more than skin color or background. But life on the base taught him otherwise. Malik quickly learned that even in uniform, judgment followed him. He was often given the dirtiest jobs, cleaning hangars or carrying tools instead of working on the vehicles he loved. Senior mechanics called him rookie, kid, or worse. They laughed when he tried to offer suggestions. He never talked back, he just observed, learned, and remembered every detail. Behind his calm eyes, a storm of ideas and quiet confidence brewed. Malik's bunk was small, his uniform often worn, but his mind never stopped turning. Late at night, when others were asleep, he'd sneak into the maintenance bay just to study the engines, tracing wires, testing systems, memorizing diagrams. He wanted to understand every sound, every click, every pulse of the machines around him. In those silent hours, he found peace and purpose. One afternoon, a sergeant passing by caught him sketching a redesign of a faulty engine on the back of a cafeteria receipt. "Johnson," the sergeant said, "you know that's not your job, right?" Malik just smiled, replying quietly, "I know, sir, but someday it will be." That line stuck with him. A quiet promise to himself, one that would soon be tested in front of the entire base. Despite being overlooked, Malik never lost his humility. He wasn't angry, he was patient. He knew that real skill didn't need validation, it needed a moment, just one. And when that moment finally came, when the general's laughter echoed across the hangar and the challenge hung in the air, Malik knew deep down that this was it. This was the moment he'd been waiting for his whole life. Because while others saw a broken engine, Malik saw an opportunity, not to prove someone wrong, but to prove himself right. The next morning, the base buzzed with tension. The failed engine test had become the talk of every mess hall and barracks. Mechanics were whispering about how even the experts couldn't bring it to life. The general had ordered another inspection that morning, determined to find out what went wrong before higher command arrived. The air inside the hangar felt heavier than usual, thick with sweat, diesel, and pride. Malik stood near the back, sweeping the floor, pretending not to listen as the team of engineers argued. He could hear every word. "The compression's off," one said. "No, it's the ignition module," another barked. But Malik knew both were wrong. He'd heard that same uneven clicking sound the day before, a sign of a blocked fuel intake valve. Simple but easily missed. Still, he stayed silent. Speaking up in this environment was dangerous for a low-ranked recruit like him. But then came the moment. The general entered, his boots echoing like gunshots across the concrete floor. "What's the report?" he demanded. The head engineer stammered something about diagnostics and circuit failures. The general's eyes narrowed, unimpressed. "So after all the money we poured into this thing, you're telling me it's just a giant paperweight?" His tone carried both anger and ridicule. No one dared to respond. Malik, standing a few feet away, felt a tug in his chest. He hesitated, then took a small step forward. "Sir," he said quietly. The general turned sharply, his gaze landing on Malik like a spotlight. "What was that, recruit?" Malik swallowed hard. "Permission to speak, sir." The general raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead if you think you can do better than my mechanics." Malik's voice was calm but steady. "It's not the circuits, sir, it's the intake valve, the engine not getting the right fuel pressure." A few mechanics exchanged smirks, others rolled their eyes. The general blinked, then burst into laughter, a deep, mocking laugh that echoed through the hangar. "The intake valve, huh? And how exactly would you know that, Private? You learn that sweeping the floor." The soldiers around him chuckled. Malik's face flushed, but his eyes stayed focused. "I just heard it, sir, the rhythm of the misfire, it's not electrical." The general took a step closer, amusement dancing in his voice. "Tell you what, Private, since you seem so sure, why don't you fix it yourself? If you can make it run, I'll marry you myself." Laughter exploded. The entire hangar filled with mocking grins and echoing chuckles. But Malik didn't laugh, he didn't even flinch. He took a slow breath, then replied, "Give me a minute, sir." The laughter died almost instantly. The room fell silent, replaced by the faint hum of the overhead lights and the distant sound of wind rattling the metal roof. The general blinked, caught off guard by Malik's confidence. "You're serious?" he asked. Malik nodded once. "Yes, sir, just 1 minute." The general crossed his arms, leaning back slightly. "Fine, impress me, Private, but if you break it worse, you'll be cleaning latrines for the rest of your service." As Malik walked toward the massive machine, every pair of eyes followed him. The janitor turned mechanic, the boy who dared to challenge the general, The laughter had faded now, replaced by curiosity, disbelief and maybe, deep down, a hint of fear. Because for the first time, someone who was never supposed to matter had just taken the spotlight. And in that silence, with nothing but the ticking of metal and the pounding of his own heart, Malik reached for a wrench, ready to show the world that the one they laughed at might be the only one who truly understood the machine. All eyes were locked on Malik as he stepped up to the silent engine, his boots echoing faintly on the concrete floor. The massive machine loomed before him, a tangled labyrinth of pipes, wires and metal. For everyone else, it looked like chaos. But to Malik, it was a puzzle, and he had always loved puzzles. The general stood off to the side with his arms folded, amusement flickering in his eyes. The other mechanics watched with smirks, whispering bets under their breath. "He'll mess it up worse," one muttered. "5 minutes till he gets kicked out," said another. Malik heard them all, but he didn't care. He took a deep breath, rolling up his sleeves, exposing hands scarred from years of fixing engines in cold garages back home. He didn't ask for help or tools, he just moved with quiet focus. He began by touching the metal casing, feeling the faint vibration under his fingertips, listening closely to the echoes within the engine's body. It was as if he could hear its heartbeat. "You're not broken," he murmured softly, almost to himself. "You're just not breathing right." The general tilted his head. "What's he doing?" he asked under his breath. One of the engineers shrugged, clearly unimpressed. "Playing pretend, sir." Malik picked up a wrench, loosened a few bolts, and began removing a small access panel that no one had thought to check. He studied the fuel line, running his finger along its length until he found the problem, a tiny piece of debris lodged inside the intake valve, disrupting the pressure. His eyes lit up. "There you are." He pulled out a small piece of cloth from his pocket, one he used to clean tools, and carefully removed the blockage. Then he adjusted the valve alignment, tightened it back into place, and secured the panel. Every motion was smooth, precise, the rhythm of a man who'd done this 1,000 times before. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The general checked his watch impatiently. "You're running out of your minute, Private," he called out with a smirk. Malik didn't look up. "Almost done, sir." His voice was steady, confident, too confident for someone in his position. The soldiers who had laughed before were now watching in silence. The hangar felt smaller, the air heavier as the young recruit worked. Finally, Malik stepped back, wiping his hands on his uniform. "All right," he said quietly. "Try it now." The mechanic nearest the ignition hesitated, glancing at the general for permission. Armstrong gave a half-smile. "Go ahead, let's see what the janitor's magic touch can do." The mechanic turned the key. The engine coughed once, twice, and then suddenly the air erupted with a deep, powerful roar. The entire hangar vibrated. The soldiers jumped, eyes wide in disbelief. The sound filled the space like thunder, smooth and steady, no misfire, no smoke, just perfect power. The machine that dozens of professionals had failed to fix was alive again. Malik stood there, calm and unmoved, his face lit by the reflection of the running engine. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. He just nodded slightly, as if greeting an old friend. The general took a slow step forward, his mouth slightly open, watching the dials stabilize perfectly. "That's impossible," one of the engineers whispered. But Malik only said, "It just needed to breathe." For the first time, the general had no words. Around them, the same soldiers who had laughed minutes ago were now silent, their pride swallowed by awe. The moment hung in the air, electric, humbling, unforgettable. Malik turned, handed the wrench to the nearest mechanic and said, "Sir, the engine's fine now." Then he began to walk away, the roaring sound behind him echoing like a declaration, a sound that said the underdog had just rewritten the rules. For a few long seconds, no one moved. The engine's roar filled the hangar, steady and powerful, vibrating through the metal walls like the heartbeat of something reborn. The soldiers who had been snickering before now stood frozen, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. Even the air felt different, charged, alive, filled with the scent of fuel and triumph. Malik stood quietly beside the machine, the faint hum of the engine pulsing through the soles of his boots. He didn't need applause. The sound alone was his victory song. General Armstrong blinked as if trying to convince himself this wasn't a trick. His cigar, forgotten, hung loosely from his fingers. Slowly he approached the engine, his eyes darting across the gauges, perfect readings. Fuel pressure, temperature and RPM all flawless. How did you?" he began but stopped, unable to find the words. The officers beside him leaned closer, murmuring among themselves. One of the engineers rubbed his temple, muttering, "That's not possible." "We checked everything," Malik simply said. "You checked what you expected to be wrong, not what actually was." There was no arrogance in his tone, no mockery, just quiet truth. The general studied him for a moment, his once condescending smirk replaced by something new, respect. The silence stretched until finally, the general let out a low chuckle, not of mockery this time, but of realization. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "The rookie did it." The soldiers who had once laughed now exchanged uneasy glances, embarrassed by their earlier ridicule. The general turned toward Malik. "Private Johnson," he said, his voice measured, "you just did what a room full of seasoned men couldn't do in 3 weeks. How?" Malik met his gaze calmly. "I just listened, sir," he replied. "Engines talk if you know how to hear them." His words carried weight, not arrogance, but quiet wisdom earned through years of struggle. The general nodded slowly, still processing the reality in front of him. The laughter, the mockery, the careless challenge, all of it now hung over him like a shadow. Around them, the other soldiers began clapping, hesitant at first, then louder, until the sound filled the hangar, echoing over the engine's steady rumble. Malik didn't expect it, didn't even turn to acknowledge it. He simply gave a small nod of gratitude and stepped back. Then the general surprised everyone. He extended his hand toward Malik. "Private," he said firmly, "consider yourself officially part of my engineering corps, effective immediately." The soldiers exchanged shocked looks. A janitor promoted on the spot, it was unheard of, but no one dared question it. Malik looked at the general's hand, then shook it respectfully. "Thank you, sir," he said quietly. As the engine continued to run, the general turned to the others and said, "Let this be a reminder, talent doesn't always wear stripes or degrees. Sometimes it just wears courage." The room went silent again, the truth of his words sinking deep. Malik finally allowed himself a faint smile, his first of the day. The machine behind him roared steadily, like it was proud too. For him, that moment wasn't just about fixing an engine, it was about fixing how people saw him. And for the first time since joining the army, he felt seen. Not as a recruit, not as a janitor, but as a man who knew his worth even when no one else did. As he walked out of the hangar, sunlight spilling across the concrete, the general called out, half laughing, half serious, "You know, Private, I might just have to keep my promise after all." Laughter rippled through the room, but this time it wasn't cruel. It was admiration. Malik looked back with a grin and said, "No need, sir. The engine's reward enough." And with that he walked away, leaving behind not just a fixed machine, but a lesson that would echo through the base for years to come. By the next morning, the story had spread across the entire base like wildfire. From the mess hall to the barracks, soldiers couldn't stop talking about what had happened in the hangar. "Did you hear about the recruit who fixed the unfixable engine?" they whispered. The general himself was speechless. Malik Johnson's name, once unknown and often dismissed, was now on everyone's lips. The man who used to sweep the floors was suddenly being saluted in the corridors. Some did it out of respect, others out of guilt. But either way, Malik had changed something fundamental in the air of that base. When he arrived at the maintenance bay that morning, a few of the same mechanics who had laughed at him now stepped aside, letting him pass first. One even muttered, "Nice work yesterday, Johnson." It wasn't much, but Malik caught the sincerity in his tone. He gave a polite nod, not holding grudges because he wasn't interested in proving anyone wrong anymore. He had already done that. Later that day, the general called him into his office. Malik stood at attention, still uncertain of what to expect. The general's expression was unreadable at first, no laughter, no sarcasm, just thoughtfulness. "At ease, Private," he said finally, gesturing for him to sit. Malik hesitated, then did. The room was silent for a moment, filled only by the faint ticking of a clock and the rustle of papers. The general leaned back in his chair. "You embarrassed a lot of people yesterday," he said with a slight grin. Malik's posture stiffened. "I didn't mean to, sir." The general nodded. "I know you didn't, that's what makes it more impressive." He opened a folder on his desk. Inside were reports, photographs, and a note from the engineering team verifying Malik's diagnosis and repair. "You did in minutes what a team of certified experts couldn't do in weeks," the general said. "That's rare." "Damn rare." Malik lowered his eyes humbly. "Just did what I was trained to do, sir." The general shook his head. "No, you did more than that. You saw something no one else could see, not just in that engine, but in yourself." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "You remind me of someone I used to know, a young mechanic who joined the army just to prove he could make something of himself. He did, but it took him 20 years. You did it in one day." He reached into his drawer and pulled out a small pin, a silver insignia reserved for technical excellence. "Private Malik Johnson, effective immediately, you're being reassigned to the Engineering and Development Division. You'll work directly under our lead project supervisor. I've also recommended you for a special training program, something that could get you certified as a military engineer." Malik's eyes widened slightly, but he managed to keep his composure. "Thank you, sir, I don't know what to say." The general smiled faintly. "You've already said it, son, with your work." There was a brief pause before the general added, almost playfully, "And for the record, that marriage offer was a joke." Malik chuckled softly. "I figured, sir." Armstrong grinned. "Good, my daughter would have killed me." Both men laughed, a moment of mutual respect finally bridging the gap between them. As Malik stood to leave, the general's voice grew more serious again. "Johnson," he said, "what you did yesterday, it wasn't just about an engine. You showed this base what it means to listen before you judge. Don't lose that. You've got something special, and the world needs men who can think, not just follow orders." Malik nodded deeply. "I won't forget that, sir." When he stepped out of the office, the sunlight hit him square in the face. He took a deep breath, feeling something he hadn't in years: belonging. He wasn't the kid from Detroit anymore who people laughed at. He was Malik Johnson, the soldier who turned ridicule into respect, the man who made a machine and an entire base come alive again. And as he walked across the yard, soldiers nodded, saluted, or smiled in acknowledgement. Some whispered, "That's him." Malik didn't stop to bask in it. He simply kept walking toward the hangar, where the engine he had fixed still sat humming quietly, a symbol of what it means to never let laughter define your limits. Weeks turned into months, and the once overlooked recruit had become one of the most respected men on the base. Private Malik Johnson was no longer sweeping floors or fetching tools. He was leading mechanical diagnostics, teaching new recruits how to listen to engines instead of just reading manuals. The same hangar where laughter had once echoed now carried the sounds of drills, engines, and Malik's calm, confident voice explaining systems with a precision that even the senior engineers admired. Under his guidance, the base's mechanical division changed completely. Malik brought a new philosophy, one rooted not in rank or titles but in curiosity and teamwork. He encouraged others to look beyond procedures and trust their instincts. "Machines aren't just metal," he would say. "They're rhythm, logic, and life. If you treat them like puzzles instead of problems, they'll never fail you." His words spread quickly, earning him a reputation not just as a mechanic, but as a thinker, a man who understood the soul of machines. The general, now one of Malik's greatest supporters, often visited the engineering bay just to watch him work. He'd lean against the doorframe, arms folded, smiling as Malik guided younger soldiers through complex repairs. "Never thought I'd see the day I'd learn from one of my own recruits," the general would joke, and Malik would always respond with his modest grin. "We all have something to teach, sir." Then came the defining moment of his new career. The military announced a major demonstration, a presentation of the new engine system that had once been considered a failure. Now, it was fully functional, upgraded, and refined under Malik's leadership. Dignitaries, officers, and engineers from across the country gathered to witness it. The hangar was spotless that morning, the engine gleaming like polished silver beneath the floodlights. When Malik stepped up to the podium in his new uniform, his rank insignia shining, there was a collective murmur of admiration. Gone was the quiet janitor. Standing before them was a confident, composed engineer with eyes that carried both humility and wisdom. He began his speech simply. "A few months ago, this engine was a joke, a challenge, a symbol of what couldn't be done. But sometimes, the things that seem impossible just need someone who refuses to stop believing they can be fixed." He gestured toward the machine behind him. "This isn't just metal and bolts, it's proof that opportunity can turn anyone into a miracle worker if you give them a chance." His words hit hard, especially for the officers who had once ignored him. The general, sitting in the front row, nodded proudly, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. As the engine powered up, the deep roar once again filled the hangar, smooth, flawless, commanding. The crowd erupted into applause. Cameras flashed, hands clapped, and Malik took a quiet step back, watching the machine with a small, knowing smile. He didn't crave the applause, he cared about the moment. The sound that had once mocked him now celebrated him. After the ceremony, the general approached, shaking his hand firmly. "You've done more than fix an engine, Johnson," he said. "You fixed a mindset." Malik looked at him, his voice calm but full of meaning. "Sometimes, sir, the hardest thing to repair isn't the machine, it's the way people see who's capable of fixing it." From that day forward, Malik became a mentor figure on the base. Recruits from all backgrounds looked up to him, not because of his title but because of his story. He'd often stay late in the hangar, running his hands over new machines, thinking about how far he'd come. Every clang of metal reminded him of the laughter that once filled that same space, and how he'd turned it into applause. The janitor who once swept the floors of the hangar was now shaping the future of military engineering. Malik's journey wasn't just about a repaired engine, it was a transformation born of patience, skill, and unshakable self-belief. And though he never said it aloud, deep down he knew, the moment that started with laughter had ended with legacy. Malik Johnson's story began spreading far beyond the base, first through military channels, then through news outlets, and eventually across the nation. Headlines called him the recruit who fixed the impossible. Interviews, articles, and documentaries began to tell his tale. A young black man, once homeless, who defied doubt and prejudice to fix a $10 million engine that experts had declared beyond repair. But for Malik, fame wasn't the goal, his focus remained on purpose. When reporters asked him how it felt to be called a genius, he always gave the same quiet answer. Genius isn't about being the smartest person in the room, it's about caring enough not to give up. Those words resonated deeply, especially with young people from tough backgrounds who saw themselves in his story. Schools began using his journey as a case study in perseverance, while mechanical academies quoted his philosophy in their training programs. Within the military, a new culture started to take root, one that valued curiosity over rank and potential over pedigree. Recruits were encouraged to experiment, to question, to think. Malik's influence reached far beyond his station. His methods were implemented in training manuals and even integrated into engineering protocols. The hangar that once echoed with laughter now had a plaque near its entrance that read, "Every machine can be fixed, every person deserves a chance. PVT Malik Johnson." But Malik's true reward came not from the recognition, but from the letters he began receiving. Dozens turned into hundreds, young men and women writing from schools, shelters, and training camps, thanking him for proving that worth doesn't depend on where you come from, but what you choose to do when no one believes in you. He read every single one, often late at night, in the quiet of his small quarters, a cup of coffee beside him, and a soft smile on his face. One letter stood out among them all. It was from a teenage girl who wrote, "I was homeless last year just like you. Everyone said I'd never make it, but after watching your story I decided to study engineering. Now I'm top of my class. Thank you for making me believe I could fix more than just machines, I could fix my life." Malik read the letter twice, his eyes misting over. That was the moment he realized his story wasn't just his anymore. It belonged to everyone who refused to give up. The general, now a close mentor and friend, often invited Malik to speak at new recruit orientations. "Standy,